Name is Kevin Cloud, and currently a producer on Snapmap. Well, started with it back in '91, and working on Wolfenstein 3D, and then we moved on to, of course, Spear of Destiny, the sequel to Wolfenstein 3D, and then on to the Dooms and the various Quakes, and now here we are with the current Doom.
And you primarily worked as basically like yourself and Adrian were like the artists on most of those games, right?
Yeah, so started off actually doing some of the page layout stuff, and then also doing some of the art for Wolfenstein, and then for a long time it's just Adrian and I doing the art, and the roles have varied from time to time. Moved up to creative director on some projects, producer on others, but I still consider myself primarily an artist.
So talk to me about the sort of impetus for Snapmap. Obviously, WADs and creation on a sort of a user creation has been a part of, it was sort of invented by you guys and what was going on with Doom. But in 2016, what was the sort of where was the idea for okay, we're going to make the single player game multiplayer, but we also want to have some sort of level creation tool in it?
Yeah, so I think we really wanted to recapture that feeling of the mod community for Doom, and so Snapmap was born out of that idea to try to deliver on that, on a solution that would work cross-platform and give a lot of flexibility for map authors to create something that felt like the actual Doom game, and also felt like some unique ideas they might come up with. We've had everything from Tetris to things that are kind of like a Pong element, and all types of ideas that have come out of Snap with the different Snap logic that's available in the game. So that's sort of where that came from.
It must be quite difficult to try and translate sort of what would be complex tools into sort of a consumer level, but presumably having it work on console and PC with the restricted controls, it must have been incredibly challenging to design that sort of interface for people.
Yeah, and I have to give a massive amount of credit to Tom Mustaine and the rest of the team over at Escalation for developing those ideas. He has a lot of experience in those areas and really brought a lot of good ideas to how to deliver what you'd consider to be a pretty complex scripting system into this visual language. You're basically snapping together logic nodes to create new game modes. That was really born out of the original prototype that he set up for it when Tom and Escalation first started working on it, and we stuck with that idea and ran with it.
Can you talk about some of user-created maps or modes in Snapchat that have sort of caught your attention? What are some of the ones that, especially close to launch, that sort of really made you go, wow?
Well, one of my favorite is a skeet shooter. It's a hoot. So basically, when we came out with the jump pads for Snapmap, the map author used them to basically launch the AI into the air, and you're basically dodging while they're shooting you, and you're trying to take them out to get the high score. It's just something addictive about just the kind of shooting for the score and trying to dodge the shots, and it's a super fun idea. It was born out of some pretty basic mechanics. It's really clever.
Obviously, there's the novelty sort of levels, or the levels that are based on other games and stuff, that always sort of appear in any sort of user-created tool, well, at least we've seen in modern games. What other types of things, just for people who aren't familiar with Snapmap, what other types of experiences can you make? This is like co-op missions and this net of single-player stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you can make basically a single-player progression. You can make a deathmatch type of game. You can make a co-op experience. So a lot of different types of game modes can be created with that. One of sort of my favorite kind of offshoot of a multiplayer deathmatch co-op experience is a hide and seek game where basically one player can be a demon player and hunt down the other players. It's actually pretty clever, pretty intense game mode. So a lot of cool ideas coming out of those combinations.
You've obviously worked on Doom back in the 90s as well. What was the sort of energy like here when people were deciding, okay, we're going to make Doom again, it's not going to be called Doom 4, we're calling it Doom, we're really going to tackle it, and we sort of have this this concept for it. What was the sort of like feeling here in the culture of it?
Now on the previous iteration you're talking about, that was actually, I was responsible for that particular project. So so I would say, what we had done is we had sort of explored a direction and got to a certain point and felt like that this wasn't really capturing what we felt like was Doom, was going to be a strong Doom, and what the fans would want from it. So sort of took a step back and re-examined what we consider to be the fundamental elements of a Doom game and re-hit those. So I would say that when we first started down those goals, it was a lot of sort of examination in terms of what types of things do we really want to see in this game, and I think the general idea was to make sure that we stayed true to the game, but still deliver on the fundamental premises of it in a way that people haven't experienced before. So the thing that really excited me about is when we first started seeing the glory kill system come together. It kind of redefined first-person combat for me and really sort of driving it close in. We had had an iteration of that in the previous game, but I think that Marty and the animation team and Hugo really worked together to come up with something very intense and exciting for that. So it was pretty cool to see that come together. And I think for me personally, that really energized the project for me. And then, at the time I was working on Snapmap, so I was kind of outside the general loop of the creative process, but I was seeing things come together, and I didn't quite get them, what was going on. So things like, the attitude of the Doom Marine. I was seeing it in pieces coming in, like the Doom Marine, punching a panel or punching a mod bot. You're like, what the heck's going on with this, right? It's just going around punching everything. But the thing is that when it all came together, it's just this really cool style, this kind of FU type of attitude from the Doom Marine that it's kind of was hard for me to see in piecemeal, but when it came together in the game, it was really cool to see. The other thing, for me personally, is that when you work on a game, you see it kind of unfold piece by piece, and you never really get a chance to experience it as the gamer experiences it. So it was fun to be a little bit outside that creative loop and then get a chance to see those levels come together and sit down and play one from start to finish and get a sense of, what it was going to be like. It's pretty exciting to see it come together. I think it's one of the really cool things about the original Doom is that when you're sitting down playing the game, you felt immersed in it in a way that we always talked about when like the imp shooting the fireball at you. For me personally, the first times that was happening, I would actually dodge and duck in my chair. I mean, so that you feel immersed in that experience. And the new Doom really delivers that, especially with the glory kills, right? It drives you right in, and you really feel like that, at least for me, it's like, oh yeah, I'm effing this thing up, so it really feels cool. So I was I was really excited to see that come together. As far as the general energy, making games is a tough business. I'm sure you've talked to a lot of developers. It's really, there's a challenge involved in there. You're really pulling a lot out of yourself, trying to get the most creative out of yourself and out of the team. And I think that the team just rose to the occasion, right? So just got into from my perspective, a groove in which people were just like, what can I do? Right. What can I do to make this better? So, in the months leading up to the release, the game was just making these massive iterations and improvements, and And I think there was just a lot of energy and excitement for it. People were, you know, not an unusual story, but especially for id, but not in game development either. It's just, you know, guys working almost around the clock just to get the best out of what they could get into Doom. So that was cool to see.
It does sound like a lot happened in like the last 6 months. Like it sounds like a lot got added in as well. Like it sort of like came together.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, I was a bit on the outside of some of that because I was focused primarily on Snapmap. But the thing is, that's the story from almost every game I've worked on. Right? You know, it's like, because it has to be built in layers. You know, you get the content in, you get the levels where you can just sort of play through them. You can't really experience it as a user until you get closer to the end. So obviously for guys that have been in the game development a little longer, they sort of know the cycle and feel a little bit more comfortable about it. But it's always, it feels like that the game goes from like 50%, 50%, and then the last 6 months or last 4 months or whatever, it takes the other 50% leap. The reality is all that stuff is sitting on the table, you know, because somebody with a vision, in this case, you know, Marty and Hugo, and a lot of other people, you know, different leads and things like that, with a vision had been working on these different pieces and laying them out, and then all bringing them together in the end. So, and when you're not working on, you know, Prop 300 or, you know, Stamp 50, you know, and I say that, people who are doing that work obviously don't see it that way at all, but I mean, it is just a lot of different items out there. When you're not working on them and have an awareness of that all of that stuff exists and you're just playing the game, you don't really get a sense that, wait a minute, this stuff is making progress. We just can't see it all. So there's hardly a game, maybe you know, back in the early 90s, back with, you know, Doom and Wolfenstein, it didn't quite feel that way because things were so easy to put in, you know, so it just, stuff kind of just grew quickly. But you know, with modern game development, it feels that way.
What did you think of, you know, you're an artist, what did you think of the style, the visual sort of aesthetic of Doom 2016?
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. You know, you know, you kind of, with the art style, you really, especially when you're trying to make something that is, you know, Doom, there's a lot of gravity to it. You know, what does it look like? What does it feel like? And there's a lot of ideas that go into that. You know, when you look at the original Doom Classic, there's not a lot to go on, you know. Back there, we were just doing pixel art, so, you know, you can pull from the inspiration, but you can't really pull from the actual assets. You get closer to Doom 3, you can certainly pull a lot there. And I think that influenced some of it, but that was just kind of the starting point for the team. We've got a fantastic concept art team. The guys really love games in general, which I think is really important, but they're all fans of Doom, and I think Hugo did a fantastic job sort of leading that visual, you know, creative vision as well. And I obviously have to give a hat tip to the tech department, you know, which delivered fantastic technology to be able to make this all run at 60 hertz. So when we were first starting this kind of next reboot of Doom, you know, the 2013 as we refer to it as, there was, you know, this idea of how do we go from a technology that was fantastic at creating landscapes and rough detail and you know what we saw in Rage, which was, you know, fantastic environments, but now we're doing something on a space station, you know, and how do we get that to look right? How do you get something to look right as sort of, you know, metals and super detailed nernies and things like that, you know? So the tech team really just, you know, from my perspective, it looks like pulling a rabbit out of a hat because I don't know, you know, how to program anything. I can't even program on a remote. But you know, those guys are just, you know, they're wizards to me. And so I was just super impressed with it. The first map I really sort of saw as what it looked like as close to finish was Foundry. And it's just, Jesus, this is just awesome. And when new stuff would come in, like being able to have stuff reflect off of surfaces, you know, and things like that, I would just spend time just kind of going back and forth and like, oh, look, that's me. You know, it's awesome. Yeah.
That's excellent. What's it like seeing the sort of reimagined versions of all of the demons? Obviously, you know, Doom 3 as well. There's like a stepping stone there, but you know, presumably you had created a lot of those pixel art demons back in the 90s as well. Had you worked on those ones as well? And then, like, what was it like seeing?
We did. I mean, you know, back then on the original Doom, Adrian did a lot of the character work. And then we also had Gregor Punchatz, which was a contractor we worked with, who did these, you know, what you've probably seen as these latex models and things. He did a lot of that, really brought those to life. I did some of the characters. There was a lot of group effort. Adrian's a fantastic pixel artist, amazing, and so he could just sit down and just whip stuff out. You know, for me, I really needed something that was a 3D model to kind of work from. But those characters generated so quickly. I mean, it's just like, okay, I want something that has a giant brain and moves around like with robotic legs. I think that, you know, that was the kind of the gist of it.
There wasn't a sort of a large backstory for each.
No, no. And so, you know, we just kind of whipped it out. And, you know, moving so quickly back then that we were just, hey, it's in, it looks cool, looks okay, let's go. There wasn't a ton of nitpicking on things. You know, when you're dealing with games today, the effort to just model it, just create it is massive, you know. And so there's a lot of weight in those decisions of what this character looks like, and does he really feel like the original Doom, or does he feel like some cool iteration of it? Is he something new, you know? And so a lot of discussions back and forth, and certainly I wasn't involved in a number of those. It's primarily Hugo and the concept team and Marty, but I think they did a fantastic job. I particularly love the Cacodemon. He's fantastic. And, you know, the Pinky was an interesting one because I was involved in some of the animation stuff and things that were kind of hitting SnapMap. That is a hard character to make look right and to animate properly, because he's proportionally not supposed to move very well. If you actually lined him up, he would not go very well. And you know, we looked at different iterations as they were coming together, and it's just like, oh my God, this thing is not going to work, right? And between the animation team and the programmers, really came to life. So the model itself was very cool iteration of the original Pinky, which again, mechanically, you know, as a body should not be able to function. He would just fall on his face, right? Because his head's so huge. So they developed that, and then the animators really had to pull the trick out, right? To make it all look like it's functioning. But when you start doing stuff like, I want it to look like a charging bull, and it's going to slide around corners, and it's actually going to run towards the player, and the player can duck at the last minute and get out of the way, and it's going to slam into a wall and stuff like that. You know, that stuff, of course, we couldn't even consider back at the original Doom. But it's stuff you think about, you know. And so it's cool to see all that evolve and make its way into, you know, a modern game when you can actually achieve all of those things. Very cool.
It's especially interesting considering the sort of the Pinky in Doom 3 also has a very strong design, but it's in a totally different direction. It's almost like a sort of like a dog, kind of large, like mutated dog. So it sort of speaks to what you're saying, that like when it works, it's sort of like, it's like, of course that's what the Pinky looks like, but it can go in like any number of directions.
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing when you're talking about doing something that's inspired from something. You know, what is the essence of it and where you're going to take it. And it does provide a lot of different options. And I love the Pinky in Doom 3. Yeah. You know, especially when you're in the room behind the glass. What the hell's this thing's going to do? It's banging on the wall. It's trying to get in. So it's a very cool introduction to the Pinky in Doom 3. But I have to say, I mean, because I worked on the original, and seeing the Pinky in this new version of Doom have that kind of closer relationship to it, I just love it. So, in Snapmap you can place like anything you want, right? You can place a Pinky, you can place a Cacodemon, So I love filling the rooms with Pinkies because I actually like the feel of shooting, ducking, dodging, getting them when they slam into the wall, shooting them in the rear end, where it does most damage. So it's very cool. It's satisfying.
The first thing I did with Snapmap was create an open area and then fill it with Cacodemons, which I then realized was like a very bad idea because they just like come at you from everywhere.
Yeah. Cacodemons are pretty tough. They're pretty tough.
What's it like actually, for instance, the codex in Doom 3? What's it like reading these sort of like detailed backstories on characters that originally had been designed with like pretty superficially, right? Like they were just like, that looks cool. And now you have all these young kids who have to justify the design decisions you made 20 years ago. Yeah,
it's funny because you do have to kind of bend yourself backwards in order to try to get some sense to some of the characters and creatures. So all of it's entertaining. The thing about, for me on Doom with the story, and I know a lot of people get a lot of different things out of it. But for me, it's style drives that story in Doom. So it's when at the beginning when you've got all you have to work with is just the first person model, and for first person shooters, your hands are pretty much your character, right? Especially in a game like Doom where you don't have a lot of, you don't have any real player talking and anything like that. So it's your gun and your hands are you. So when Samuel's there and talking over the intercom and the Doom Marine reacts just by punching the shit out of it, it's like, okay, that's awesome. And it just sort of goes that way. It's just sort of, that style sort of permeates. And so that's the thing I really dig about the story. For the different codex elements, and it's like, what's the characters about that's entertaining and interesting. I like the sort of irreverence that the UAC ties with religion and stuff. It's very cool. It's tongue in cheek. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it just has kind of for me personally, just get a little bit of a badass attitude that I like. So.
You were there back in the day when you had a team of like a half dozen people wearing lots of hats, doing that type of work, and you seem to have sort of been in the transition of that specialization sort of taking hold, and the world we live now in design very much seems to be like super like specialized. Do you think do you like mourn for the days when people could, change roles a little bit, or do you think that there's a different type of satisfaction in the type of workflow there is today in design, where people are sort of more specialized and own their one thing?
Well, it varies. I mean, I'm 50 now. If you ask me if I mourn for the days when I was 30, sure, every once in a while I do. There's no doubt about that. As for me personally, I certainly enjoy those days where you could sort of hit a lot of different things. But I have to say, although I worked around a lot of very talented people, I took my lead from like what Adrian was doing, so I never saw myself as being able to sort of hit that level, right? So it was great for me to be able to say, okay, well, I'll come over, I'll do some animations, I'll do some modeling, and so this really gave me a lot of opportunities to contribute and provide some cool stuff for the game. Whereas now, you're doing character art, you can't wander off and, hey, I think I'll try this. It's because there's another guy who's been doing that for 10 years, whatever it is, and is super fantastic at that. And of course, all the guys, I think, try their hand at different stuff. Artists today are you know, they may be taking a painting class on the side, or they may be fantastic painters, or, you know, build robotic sets, or who knows what all they get into, because the type of people we're getting into the gaming now are guys that could do anything, right? They could be illustrators, they could work for movies. That wasn't the case for me personally,
Right.
you know. And so, you know, personally for me, I enjoy those better. But you know, as far as the artist that's sitting down and doing the work he's doing today, he may have a completely different perspective. You know, I can say that I would hate to have to apply for a job here as an artist.